Hello, I'm Tim Richter. This is number 0863, the Stuff Files program with Peter Anthony Holder, and it comes to you right now.
The following program is brought to you in living color.
Now, it's time for an eclectic mix of interviews and some of the oddest news stories you'll ever hear. It's the Stuff File program with Peter Anthony Holder.
Hey there, hi there, ho there! Peter Anthony Holder here with you, and yes, this is indeed another edition of the Stuff File program, number 0863. And coming up on this edition of the Stuff File program, you'll meet Elaine Rock, author of Dusty Roads, who talks about the women's movement and the trailblazer flight attendant that was Barbara Dusty Rhodes. Back in the day, Rhodes fought against ageism within the stewardess ranks, including a now famous press conference.
She walks up to the microphone, and they had 8 stewardesses, and they told the press conference, "Can you tell which one of us are over 32 and under 32? Of course they couldn't. 4 were, 4 weren't. So they said no, and she steps up to the microphone and says, "Alita, I'm not, but do I look like an old bag?" And of course they screamed no. And basically the press took that whole scenario and today they would say made it viral across the United States in every newspaper.
Ellen Bassuk is the co-author, along with her son Daniel, of Between Two Worlds, a psychiatrist and her son's quest for compassionate mental health care. Even though she is a psychiatrist, there were moments dealing with Daniel's schizophrenia that Ellen had hope and worry in the midst of uncertainty.
I maintained a lot of hope about the future. Danny had a lot of qualities, endearing qualities, a lot of interests. He was very intelligent, which was helpful. There were some positive characteristics in the picture, but there were certainly moments, 3 o'clock in the morning when you wake up and you think, oh my God, that I certainly would worry a lot about what would happen with this.
And there's lots and lots of Stuff File news, dad joke theater, Sir Dudley's Poetry Corner, morning shower thoughts, and of course, an idiot of the day. The guest slater, the person who told you this was show number 0863, was Tim Richter, who is the president and CEO of the Canadian Alliance to End Homelessness. We had him back on the show on show number 0858, so you can go and listen to that as well. And we'll also be running their PSA later in the show. Thank you very much, Tim, for doing the guest slate on this edition of the Stuff File program, a show that is listener-supported, fan-funded radio that depends on you for our success. Join us at patreon.com to help make this show an even bigger and better radio experience. Well, let's get right to the stuff. Authorities in Vietnam say they will increase patrols after a man on a motorbike rode to Son Tra Mountain, also known as Monkey Mountain, to tease wild monkeys there. Specifically, he covered his entire torso, arms, and lower legs in bananas. There are numerous signs in the area warning people not to feed wildlife. The man, described only as a foreign tourist, left after being confronted by an officer who warned him about his inappropriate behavior as several monkeys looked on. Authorities said foreign tourists, but I heard Darwin Awards applicant. Hasn't this moron learned anything from Caesar in War for the Planet of the Apes?
I did not start this war. Tell your colonel you have seen me now, and I have a message for him. Leave us, the woods, and the killing can't stop.
Oh yeah, there could come a time when they're way past feces flinging. In North Carolina, there are lots of rules when finding a place to do tattoos. And yet a video going around online shows that someone found a Wendy's in Gastonia. Shelby McSwain apparently recorded the video from a car outside the fast food joint, looking in at a blue-gloved person using what looked like a tattoo gun on a blue-haired shirtless person. Wait, isn't there usually a sign that says no shirt, no shoes, no service? Anyway, a municipal official said the restaurant would be reminded not to tattoo without a permit, but the Wendy's franchisee says it already took immediate disciplinary action. They said in a statement, "This behavior does not reflect the standards we set for our teams." Is that the behavior of the artist, the tattooee, or whomever didn't intervene? So tell us, what's the beef?
Hey, where's the beef? I don't think there's anybody back there.
You want something better. You're Wendy's kind of people.
And still with burgers, Burger King is piloting an AI chatbot called Patty in employee headsets to monitor customer service interactions and assist with operations. How cute. A chatbot named Patty at a burger joint. The OpenAI-powered system listens to phrases like, "Welcome to Burger King," "Please," and "Thank you" to evaluate worker friendliness. Chief Digital Officer Thibaut Roux said the technology serves as a coaching tool trained using feedback from franchisees and guests to define friendliness standards. The AI assistant helps employees with meal preparation questions, equipment guidance, and inventory management through the BK Assistant platform. Managers can ask Patty how their location performs on friendliness metrics. The system connects to drive-through orders, kitchen equipment, and inventory systems, automatically updating menus when items run out within 15 minutes. So, the chatbot is in their headsets to monitor customer service interactions. So now we're learning manners from a chatbot. Is there not anything anymore that we can learn on our own or from our parents? Don't you get the feeling that if we let it, AI will be our next cult leaders?
BK, have it your way.
Oh, that's what they're saying for now. Anyway, let's get to our first guest here in this edition of the Stuff All program, shall we? Back in the 1950s and 60s, women couldn't buy property, get a credit card or passport in their own names, or open a bank savings or checking account without a male cosigner. There were a lot of other things that women couldn't do, and award-winning author Elaine, who wrote the book Dusty Roads, is here to share little-known facts about the women's movement and the forgotten civil rights trailblazer, Barbara Dusty Rhodes, an American Airlines flight attendant, union organizer, and lobbyist to Congress. Elaine joins us from California via Riverside.com. Hi, Elaine.
Hi, how are you, Peter?
Just tickety-boo. Thanks very much for taking the time to be on the program with us. Now, March is Women's History Month, and I want to go back a little bit to exactly who Barbara Dusty Rhodes was. I know who she was, but what was it for her that made push come to shove when she said, enough is enough?
Well, when Dusty was a younger girl, she had been enamored by the women's Air Force service pilots during World War II. And she was in high school at the time, and so she aspired to be a pilot. And then her PE teacher came into class one day and told everybody in the swimming pool that she was leaving because she was marrying her soldier boyfriend, and that she had to be fired as a result. None of them had ever heard about that, especially Dusty. She was incensed. She talked to her father about it, And he said, that's just the way it is. So there were two things going on for her. She wanted to do something and she couldn't. She saw her PE teacher be the victim of discrimination, and she vowed to change it if she possibly could. Well, little did she know, when she became a stewardess in 1950, they had the marriage ban. They had to sign a pledge that they would never get married. And then in 53, American Airlines was the first to do this. They instituted a rule that said they would be fired at the age of 32 because they wanted their stewardesses to be young and attractive for the businessmen who were most of the passengers at the time. So she got involved with her union and decided to fight it. She was incensed. And the good thing about this is it's an inspiration to us, because she was not subject to that age rule because she was grandmothered. She'd already been hired. It was only for new hires. So she did something selfless for others. That made a big impression on me.
One of the things that she had to undergo back in the day is it was mandatory for stewardesses to wear girdles
Yep.
and submit to, and this, a flick check.
Yes, yeah. When I first met her, she described it. It was basically her index finger doing a flick movement. And so she called it a flick check. And before they boarded the airplanes, they had to be checked for girdles. It was random, but frequent. And they also had to be weighed. And a lot of people don't realize that everything had to be weighed in the earlier days of aviation, including luggage, pilots, stewardesses, everyone. But then when they stopped having most of the people do that, even passengers, which they're trying to do again, so women were the only ones who had to be weighed. And she didn't think that was fair. Her whole thing was, it has to be fair and dignified for women. And they were exposed to just being, well, ridiculed in many ways, and misogyny.
Well, when did you decide to write the book?
Well, I met her at our local Sonoma County YMCA swimming pool. It was a hot therapy pool. And my friends were talking to her. And I'm going to bring this spiritual story in real quick, but when I was descending into the pool, when my friends were saying, you got to get over here and meet these ladies, my world stood still. It literally, time stood still. Everybody was frozen, including me, and this booming voice came through and said, this is what you've been waiting for. Well, I better pay attention then. So I got to the pool, met her, and she told us all the stories about it. And I looked her up after I got home and saw that she had been written about before, but there was very little information about how she did and when she did things to help women. And I went to her again and said, I want to write your biography. Has anybody asked you to do that before? And she said, okay, I've just been waiting for someone to ask. And she lived here, and for the next 7 years, I interviewed her and her partner, Jean, and did a lot of research, which was difficult during COVID because none of the governmental offices were open. But I persisted on this, and the result is this book, and I'm glad I did.
Before you actually stepped into that pool, were you fully aware of the history of Barbara Dusty Rhodes, or was
Oh, yeah.
she just an enigma to you at that time?
No, she wasn't. I wasn't aware of her at all, but I'd been very active all my life in women's organizations, especially National Organization for Women. I thought, why haven't I heard about this woman before? And in fact, the woman who started Women's History Month, Molly McGregor, and some of the other teachers in the Santa Rosa School District here, also had the same reaction. And Dusty was honored in their 2017 group of women for trailblazers in labor and business. So she wasn't on anybody's radar. She was sort of one of those people who doesn't broadcast her own accolades.
It sounds like she was just a trailblazer.
Yeah.
But again, she wasn't looking, as you say, for the accolades. She just quietly did her thing.
That's exactly right. She did what needed to be done, and at that time, Women in the 50s, they weren't really fighting against any of these ridiculous rules. So she just did what she needed to do and moved on and kept doing that all her career, actually. She was a behind the scenes type of person, even though her personality was amazingly big and joyful, and she had the best voice, and she could just charm any man.
I mentioned in the introduction that she was a lobbyist to Congress. What was she lobbying about at that time?
She was trying to get a bill written to overturn the firing of stewardesses at age 32. She hooked up with John Bell Williams, who was actually a Southern segregationist at the time. They co-wrote a bill, took it to a committee in Congress, and of course all of the congressmen were there and no women, and they began berating it as the old broads bill. That's when she knew she wasn't just fighting management at the airlines, that she was fighting national discrimination against women. So she moved on, had a press conference when the age rule was one final contract issue that hadn't been resolved. She got the press conference to support her because that's when it really meant a lot for publicizing the issues. She walks up to the microphone, and they had 8 stewardesses, and they told the press conference, "Can you tell which one of us are over 32 and under 32?" Of course they couldn't. 4 were, 4 weren't. So they said no, and she steps up to the microphone and says, "A Lolita I'm not, but do I look like an old bag?" And of course they screamed no, and basically the press took that whole scenario and today they would say made it viral across the United States in every newspaper. So she ended up trying to get these rules overturned through contracts on the airlines and by lobbying people. This was a time when Republicans and Democrats got along and they partied with each other. And she met people in Washington, D.C., and became friends with Congresswoman Martha Griffiths, who actually helped get the Civil Rights Act and Title VII approved in Congress, and helped overturn the stalling at the Equal Employment Opportunities Commission, who was the agent that approved or disapproved whether some stewardesses could move forward with their legal cases against discrimination. Unfortunately, at the beginning of all that, it took several years after the Civil Rights Act passed because 1/3 of the discrimination complaints at the time came from flight attendants alone, and the men on the commission who approves these cases stalled it for years. Then American Airlines was about ready to go to strike on the issue, and Dusty asked Martha, "Can you get somebody on the commission to just approve this so we don't shut down interstate commerce?" And she did, and it was over like within one day.
You took 7 years to write this book.
Yeah.
When you finished it, was Dusty pleased?
You know, this was really something. When I finished that book, Dusty was 94. We celebrated her birthday and the book around the same time when she turned 95. And before she died, the last time I saw her, I had been reading every chapter to her all along when I finished it. I read the final chapter to her, and she just broke out crying and loved it. And I knew she wasn't in good health, but that was the last time I saw her because she died in November of 2023. And I was so glad she had the opportunity to at least hear me read it to her.
It sound like absolute fate.
It does, doesn't it? It's like it was destiny for me. I felt that all along. And it was interesting to be able to feel even that no matter, whenever I got myself into a corner with my writing, I always felt someone was helping me up there. and it's been a wonderful ride for me and a great journey because it really solidified my own spiritual feelings as well.
It sounds like Barbara couldn't go anywhere until you came along.
That's exactly right. Nobody else was going to write her biography, and I thought it was a story that needed to be told. I mean, when Gloria Steinem even said at the college that, "Dusty, you're the one who started it all," and convinced her for the first time. That's when she cried again. I only saw her a few times cry. But that was another time because Gloria finally told her, I should be thanking you. And she had no idea how important it was that she did it because, of course, it was a time when most people thought Gloria Steinem and Betty Friedan were the ones that started it. But we always have somebody who is thought of as the people who start, but in reality, there are always people who inspired it before.
Again, the book is called Dusty Roads. It's about civil rights trailblazer Barbara Dusty Rhodes. Elaine, thank you very, very much for taking the time to be on the program with us.
It's my pleasure, Peter. Thank you. There's a lot more to it.
Elaine Rock, author of Dusty Roads. You can go to our website at thestuffile.com, check out the show number for this program, which is show number 0863, and you'll find the link to Elaine's site, plus links to either Amazon.com or Amazon.ca, where you can order her books directly. You're listening to the Stuff File program with me, Peter Anthony Holder.
And now, Dad Joke Theater.
What do you call a woman who sets fire to all of her bills? Bernadette!
Join us again for another Stuff File program, Dad Joke Theater.
There's still more guests, more news, and an idiot of the day coming your way on the Stuff File program. Stay tuned. The Stuff File program is a listener-supported, fan-funded radio show that depends on you for our success. Join us at patreon.com to help make this show an even bigger and better radio experience. Sign up and find out about our rewards program. Being a patron doesn't have to be a long-term commitment. There's absolutely no obligation. You could join today and end whenever you'd like. But the time we have your support would be so greatly appreciated. We'd also love to hear your thoughts about the show and even your ideas for rewards. Join us for the ride. Join us at patreon.com/thestufffile program.
It's garbage day. You're out enjoying your daily walk when you come upon two children rummaging through a recycling bin. One of them catches your eye. You look away. Are you empathetic or apathetic? Don't let homelessness assumptions get in the way of homelessness solutions. Go to CanadaCanDoIt.ca. Help the Canadian Alliance to end homelessness.
Coming to you from Canada, the land of universal healthcare, colorful money, and the correct spelling of the word theater. This is The Stuff File with Peter Anthony Holder.
And still to come on the program, we'll talk to Ellen Bassuk, who is the co-author of Between Two Worlds, a psychiatrist and her son's quest for compassionate mental health care. We also have Sir Dudley's Poetry Corner, plus morning shower thoughts, and, of course, an idiot of the day coming your way a little later on, and more Stuff All News right here, right now. The city of South Fulton Police Department in Georgia released a tongue-in-cheek advisory after discovering a Cutwater lemon drop martini in a student's lunchbox. Officers wrote on Facebook, "Say, twin, before you send them babies off to school," and this whole part was now in capitals like they're yelling, "check the lunchbox!" The warning accompanied a photo showing the child's lunch containing Doritos, snacks, and the 11% alcoholic beverage. Again, the authorities' Facebook said, "This is not Capri Sun. That is not apple juice. That is a whole parent had a long night starter pack." Police joked about little Johnny arriving to third period while carrying a martini. Officials urge parents to tighten up and avoid sending students to school with drinks that requires an ID. The incident highlights ongoing concerns about alcoholic beverages packaged similarly to child-friendly drinks, with regulators worried about accidental purchases. Yeah, I suppose alcohol in school in the hands of children could be a major issue. You know what's a bigger issue in school? Guns. And Benjamin Phelps jumped into a Wisconsin Rapids ambulance the night of February 17th while paramedics were loading a patient, forcing medical staff to flee for safety. The stolen ambulance reached speeds over 70 miles per hour during a 20-minute chase through Wood County, with emergency lights flashing as Phelps swerved around tire deflation devices and bounced through dirt roads. Police used drones and ballistic shields when the vehicle finally stopped near Pittsville after a tire deflated. Officers found Phelps completely naked and unarmed when he emerged from the ambulance. The patient inside received hospital evaluation and treatment. Phelps faces charges including third offense driving while intoxicated and remains in Wood County Jail. Police offered no explanation for his nudity.
There are 8 million stories in the naked city. This has been one of them.
Geez, I hope they hosed him down when they got him to the police station. And now, this.
The Stuff File presents Sir Dudley Piddly Havisham Sedgwick Smythe's Poetry Corner.
One Saturday morning at 3, a cheesemonger's shop in Paris collapsed to the ground with a thunderous sound, leaving only a pile of debris.
And let's get to our next guest. For 4 decades, Elaine Bassuk has navigated the world of psychiatry, advocacy, and motherhood, shaped by her son Daniel's lifelong struggle with mental illness. Together, they have written the book Between Two Worlds, a psychiatrist and her son's quest for compassionate mental health care. She joins us from Boston via Riverside.com. Hi, Ellen.
Hi, good morning.
Nice to have a chance to chat with you.
Same.
First of all, how did you come together with your son to write this book?
Danny and I have talked for a long time about the possibility of writing this book. As he began to manage his mental illness and do better and better, we thought it would be helpful to other families, to other people struggling with mental illness, to write about Danny's experience. And we had records that went back to the time he was 6 months old. So it's really a lifelong history because he's 40 years old now. And it's the lifelong story of how it's possible to overcome a serious mental illness.
Did you first broach the idea of doing the book with him, or did he broach it with you?
We started writing it about 3 years ago. It seemed like a natural evolution that we began to discuss. He knew I was working on it, and I began to ask him various questions about his internal experience, which at this point, because he's doing so much better, he was really able to talk about. And from that, and all the records that we had, we thought this would be a good idea.
You're a psychiatrist, you're a single mom, you have dealt with this for a long period of time, but even with your expertise, was there anything you learned in doing this book with your son that you hadn't thought of or didn't know beforehand in relationship to your son's schizophrenia?
Yes, first of all, it's important to note that schizophrenia almost invariably starts in late adolescence. It's not present, or at least ostensibly present, during childhood. So that's just important to consider. And what would you like me to address?
I just wanted to know if you learned anything in just doing this book, even though you had a background in psychiatry. What did you learn about your son's situation that you gleaned from putting together this book with your son?
Well, first, there are a whole bunch of things. First of all, that the illness is manageable, That's the first thing. We focused a lot on how the voices operated, and that was really new information for me. In the literature, there's a lot of mention of voices, and there actually is an international hearing voice network. So, and it's been written about a whole lot, but it was never described in the detail that we were able to capture. Danny met with the graphic artist, and very quickly they were able to draw what the voices look like and discussed how he saw them, what it looked like, how they popped up, and what the experience was like on a daily basis. That kind of detail was new. Most of the literature talks about the voices during the acute episode of schizophrenia, and they're usually vicious and nasty, and that's what's highlighted. But you never get a sense of how they really operate in somebody's world. And as Danny improved more recently, the voices have not gone away, but he's learned to manage them. But the more aggressive, nasty ones have receded in the background, and a few of them he views as his friends. So that was really important. The interaction with the mental health system I was very aware of because I had worked in a mental hospital for a year. And so I knew the drawbacks of some of the hospitals, particularly the state hospitals. So that's some of what we really focused on. And most importantly, what it's like for a parent to have a kid who was different.
You are a psychiatrist. You were also, I believe, during the time period that he was growing up, you were a single mom, correct?
Yes, that is true.
Did you ever think during that course of discovery of your son's illness, did you ever think, what would that be like if you hadn't been a psychiatrist? In other words, if you were just a single mom learning to grope with this situation and you didn't have the clinical background that you have?
Well, that's a complicated question. I think most importantly that I was able to interfere with some of the ways that medication was used. I had the detailed knowledge about that, and that really mattered because the tendency is to use one med and then be very impatient about it and begin to add others, adding up to polypharmacy so a patient could be on 4 or 5 antipsychotics. That doesn't work. that does not help. And what we finally did is I interfered with the hospital's dictum, and we moved Danny to a peripheral hospital near Cape Cod, which was small and which I actually was able to have some control. And we washed out all his meds and put him on Clozaril, which was the cutting edge antipsychotic at the time. And he began to perk up and start to do a little bit better. And the voices receded some at that point, and it was a turning point. But the issue of medication is complicated because some people with schizophrenia do okay without meds. The side effects are tough, and somebody has to be able to tolerate them and be willing to take the meds appropriately.
When did you first become concerned about your son's mental health, and how long after did you get any kind of diagnosis?
Well, it's complicated. When Danny, believe it or not, when Danny was 6 months old, I had some concerns. There were periods that he was very like little babies, And then other times he was completely disconnected, and you couldn't really make good contact with him. And I actually took him to see a child analyst at the time who said, keep an eye on his developmental landmarks, which of course I did. But the complicating factor with Danny is that he began to show some motor tics when he was about 2 years old. And those expanded over time, and it was clear that he had Tourette, and a very bad case of Tourette, which peaked around age 10 or 11, which is when he got kicked out of school. Tourette, in about 80% of people, disappears in late adolescence, and fortunately it disappeared. But then it was replaced in a short period of time by a real schizophrenic break. So he has a more complicated picture than a lot of other people with serious mental illness.
Is Daniel an only child?
No.
How many other children do you have?
One.
Is that child older or younger than Daniel?
That child is 3.5 years younger. Let me just say one thing. There's one very complicating factor in all of this. Both of these kids are adopted.
The reason why I asked the question is I was just curious to know if, because of all that Daniel was going through and what you had to go through with Daniel, did it ever, in your mind, neglect the other child? Or did that other child ever feel neglected because you were spending so much time with what Daniel was going through?
I think the answer is probably yes, but that other child had a lot of resources personally, and I was very close to her, and we had, for example, a special night during the week where we went out separately from Danny. So I tried to carve out space that was specifically for her. And I think that was helpful. But I also think that she felt unsafe because Danny would have episodes of being quite out of control. And he was scary. But he was a skinny little kid when he was little. He's a big guy now, which was fortunate, actually. So there is definitely impact on the other child. And we did the best we could, and I brought in, one of the things I was fortunate enough to do was we had enough resources to bring in additional supports. And that made a difference because it wasn't just me. And when Danny was kicked out of school at age 11, we actually had an army of people hired by the school system who were in the house. So there were other personnel to help and family as well.
We are talking with Ellen Bassuk, a psychiatrist and the co-author with her son of the book Between Two Worlds, a psychiatrist and her son's quest for compassionate mental health care. We'll take a quick break and we'll continue this conversation on the other side.
This is the Stuff File.
Giving you something to think about. This is Morning Shower Thoughts.
If you're a surgeon and the only thing you listen to in the OR is Sade, does that make you a smooth operator?
Morning Shower Thoughts from the Stuff File program.
Got something for the mailbag? Drop Peter a line. He'd love to hear from you. Send your email to mailbag@thestufffile.com. And remember, stuff is spelled S-T-U-P-H. That's mailbag@thestufffile.com. Or catch up with him on Twitter or Facebook. There's more Stuff File coming your way in just a few moments.
Here's a brief word about our show and my book. If you become a regular Patreon patron of the Stuff File program, I'll give you an e-version of my book, Great Conversations, my interviews with two men on the moon and a galaxy of stars. It's easy to do. Just go to patreon.com and become a patron to help make this show an even bigger and better radio experience. So, join Patreon and claim your copy of Great Conversations, my interviews with two men on the moon and a galaxy of stars. Sign up at patreon.com/The Stuff File Program.
Actors, authors, quirky guests, and the common folk. It all comes to you here on the Stuff File program with Peter Anthony Holder.
We're talking with Elaine Bassuk, a psychiatrist, an advocate, and a mother who, along with her son Daniel, who has had a lifelong struggle with mental illness, have written a book together called Between Two Worlds, a psychiatrist and her son's quest for compassionate mental health care. And Elaine, what were some of the stigmas that you went through, both you and Daniel went through, while he was growing up dealing with schizophrenia?
Well, remember, he didn't have the diagnosis of schizophrenia until he was a late adolescent, and then he was hospitalized, and it changed. But certainly with Tourette, we were basically ostracized in the neighborhood. If a street lamp went out, we got a phone call. Was it Danny? Danny didn't get invited to birthday parties as other kids. I didn't have a network of other parents who were raising their kids, which is very common in school situations. And because his school situation was so unusual, there was no support network that emerged from those relationships. That was sad. So the supports were different and less. And Daniel was basically fingered by, and other kids stayed away from him because he was different.
Did the diagnosis of schizophrenia bring any other barriers or ostracization for him or for you?
Well, once he had that diagnosis, he was quite out of control. He was delusional, he was hearing voices, and he was hospitalized initially for about a year, on and off, but mainly in the hospital. And that was a very difficult time because these hospitals, particularly the public hospitals, are, from my point of view, very deficient. They don't have the personnel or funds to properly take care of patients. They're used mainly for safety reasons and supposedly stabilization, but there's very little therapy or talk therapy or activities at a lot of these places. So Danny basically sat around and hallucinated, which is not helpful.
You are a psychiatrist,
Yep.
So I'm just wondering if a little information goes a long way, or is a lot of information somewhat daunting for you? And the reason why I ask that question is, knowing what you know going through this situation, at any point did you think, oh, Daniel's going to be fine in the long run? Or were you really fearful for a prognosis coming out in the end that was hopeful?
Well, you certainly can't know the future, but somehow or another, I maintained a lot of hope about the future. Danny had a lot of qualities, endearing qualities, a lot of interests. He was very intelligent, which was helpful. So there were some positive characteristics in the picture, but there were certainly moments, 3 o'clock in the morning when you wake up and you think, oh my God, that I certainly would worry a lot about what would happen with this. The one thing we did, which is described extensively in the book, is we set up what's called a recovery-oriented system of care. And boy, it's worked wonderfully. We put together a support network separately from the traditional mental health system, so we stepped away. And it has a different orientation and views the patient as a whole person, not as a diagnosis or a label, as somebody. They view schizophrenia as just one part of the human experience. And it's very strengths-oriented rather than deficit-oriented. And it's filled with hope. Hope is the driver. There's a whole network and a whole literature that has emerged around that. A lot of the support people are people with so-called lived experience who have had serious mental health issues. And in fact, a couple of our personnel have been with Danny now for more than 10 years. So it's a very strong support group, and they've made a huge difference in his life. But we did step away from the traditional system.
There is a lot to be said for mental health these days. You hear it more and more amongst the general population. But do you still think that there's a long way to go?
Oh, I think psychiatry, particularly, there's a tremendous shortage now in mental health workers of all kinds, across the whole spectrum. The amounts of funding for mental health have decreased. Psychiatrists seem to have retreated into, there's probably a better way to say it, but pill pushers, and see patients for 15, 20 minutes once a month. That's not especially helpful for a lot of people. It doesn't establish an empathic, ongoing, committed relationship, which is what people need, I think. So I think psychiatry's role, but it reflects some of the collapse in the overall healthcare system in the last 5 or 10 years. I mean, I've seen it myself. Healthcare is dispensed in a different way now. It's very profit-motivated, high-techy, very administratively driven, very, very different than when I started. Because I think now, if I started now, I would not have become a psychiatrist.
Why not?
Because it would require too much. I would have been somewhat hopeless about the possibility of redesigning the system within the troubles of the overall healthcare system, which are quite extensive right now.
What message do you have for parents whose kids are struggling with their mental health?
Well, first of all, pay attention to it. Don't ignore it. You hear stories and see news clips about, for example, some of the kids who got involved in some of the school shootings, although it's a very small percentage of people with schizophrenia. Pay attention to their mental health concerns. Remain hopeful. Be advocates for your kid. Continue to protect your kid. Explore medication. Explore the possibility of a supportive, empathic network that you set up that have people with lived experience in it. Look at recovery-oriented approaches. There's some hopefulness in all of this.
You said protect your children. Well, back in the day, that was a little easier to do because nowadays, with social media, it's literally in the house right there at their hand on the phone or computer. So how do you protect from that? Because that's an issue that is growing as far as mental health issues are concerned. The fact that social media is so rampant. So how do you get around that?
You've got to change policy. You've got to become an advocate. You've got to be out there and have your voice heard. You can't just sit back and watch all these things evolve. You've got to be part of the advocacy groups who speak up about these kinds of issues. I mean, that's such a complicated question because it involves general policy in this country. And as we both know, there's a lot of tension in the United States right now.
How is Daniel doing now?
He's doing wonderfully. He's been living independently for about 10 years. He has his own apartment. He has a little menagerie of animals that he takes care of. He volunteers at some food banks 3 days a week. He exercises a great deal and regularly. There are many positive things in his life. He's still very active. He takes a number of courses, and I talked to him this morning, and he's a busy guy. He's heavily scheduled today and doing quite well. That's not to say that he doesn't still have to struggle with some of the mental health concerns, but he understands them better. He knows what he's dealing with, and he knows how to respond to some of them.
Your book is called Between Two Worlds, a psychiatrist and her son's quest for compassionate mental health care. I'm just wondering, this is an important book to certainly be read by anyone who has children who have a concern with their mental health. But beyond that, why do you feel this is an important book for the general population, never mind people just with kids?
All of our mental health really matters. And people tend to ignore it, or it's highly stigmatized. Part of the intent in the book was to lessen some of the stigma attached. 1% of the population has schizophrenia. That's a big number. And it's not hopeless. It's not the end of your life. It's manageable. It's treatable. And people can have a full and enriched life if they have the proper supports. So I thought this book was important for everybody because mental health, it affects everybody. Everybody has somebody who has mental health concerns, or they themselves have mental health concerns. And historically, schizophrenia was a terribly stigmatized, hopeless disorder. And it's not. It's treatable, it's manageable, and people can have full and purposeful lives.
The book, again, is entitled Between Two Worlds, a psychiatrist and her son's quest for compassionate mental health care. Ellen, thank you very, very much for taking the time to be on the program with us. And all I can say is Daniel was very lucky to have you as a mom.
Well, thank you. I've been lucky to have Daniel. He's an endearing, caring human being with a real purpose in his life.
Ellen Bassuk, the co-author, along with her son Daniel, of Between Two Worlds, a psychiatrist and her son's quest for compassionate mental health care. You can go to our website at thestuffile.com to the What's On page for this show, which is show number 0863, and you'll find links to either Amazon.com or Amazon.ca, where you can order her book directly. You're listening to the Stuff File program with me, Peter Anthony Holder, and we do have one more Stuff File news story to share with you before the end of the show, so let's get right to it. A family from Ireland allegedly planted a hair on their plate to avoid paying a $600 bill at Pony Restaurant in Sydney, Australia. CCTV footage appears to show a man reaching under his arm, pulling out hair and placing it on his plate after finishing the meal. Wow, doesn't plucking armpit hair really hurt? Anyway, the group had ordered expensive items, including a 1.8 kilogram tomahawk steak with entrees and drinks. Kitchen manager Neil Nolan, who has worked at the venue for 20 years, said, "I've never seen this ever before. Like, this is another level of trying to scam." Staff noted the hair was blonde while kitchen workers did not match that description. The man became agitated and, quote, went nuts, basically, unquote, when confronted. refusing to pay any portion of the bill. Management waived the entire amount to end the disturbance. Police were notified, but advised little immediate action could be taken. The family did it again at another nearby venue. Whoa. The cops can't do anything, even with CCTV footage? That's literally the pits. And boys and girls, it's that moment you've all been waiting for. It's time now for the Idiot of the Day.
And now it's time for the strange things adults do. This Stuff File presents the Idiot of the Day.
In Pennsylvania, Pocono Mountain Regional Police were called because Sean McDermott was accused of setting multiple fires inside his townhome in an effort to kill spiders, sparking a blaze that spread to several neighboring units. Officers responded at around 6 p.m. on February 23rd. The flames damaged the suspect's home and 3 connected townhomes. According to investigators, a witness reported seeing McDermott repeatedly lighting small fires inside his home throughout the day. McDermott allegedly told the witness he was trying to kill spiders. Police say McDermott had a smoldering fire burning on the floor and then placed a love seat on top of it. The witness told officers he attempted several times to extinguish the fires, but McDermott continued to relight them. Both men reportedly left the area, and when they returned, the townhome was fully engulfed. McDermott fled the scene in a U-Haul truck. Nearly 100 miles and 2 days later, New York City Police Department officers responded to a hit-and-run collision involving that truck in Midtown Manhattan. The man, later identified as McDermott, abandoned the truck and took off running, but was taken into custody. At the time of McDermott's arrest, NYPD's Emergency Services Unit and Bomb Squad were called to the scene, and officers found nitrous oxide canisters, better known as laughing gas, and a liquid accelerant in the truck. Well, who's laughing now? McDermott has been charged with more things than I can list off here. By the way, he has 4 prior arrests in New York City, including an assault charge in 2019. Now, why? Oh, why? Would you try to kill spiders by setting your house on fire? One reason, and one reason only. You're an idiot!
Gee, I'm only a kid, but even I know you're an idiot.
And that's it for this edition of the Stuff File program, number 0863. Hope you enjoyed it. The website is thestufffile.com, and once again, stuff is spelled S-T-U-P-H, where you'll find information and links on all of our guests by going to the weekly Stuff File page. Just look for the corresponding program number, and once again, that's 0863. Email me at peter@thestufffile.com. You can also find me on Facebook, Spoutable, Mastodon, and Blue Sky as PA Holder. Check us out on patreon.com, where you can become a patron of the program. Hope to see you back here for our next show on the air, online, or as a download. We're coming to you from everywhere, including KDXRadio.com, over the air on World FM in New Zealand, WNRHLP-FM in Newport Richey, Florida, KZZHLP-FM in Eureka, California, CKUW-FM in Winnipeg, CFMU in Hamilton, CKLU in Sudbury, Local 107.3 FM in St. John, CHSR in Fredericton, and also streaming on just about any streaming service your little heart desires. That's it. Bye-bye.
You've been listening to the Stuff File program with Peter Anthony Holder, a presentation of Flying Fish Communications. No animals were harmed in the production of this program, except, of course, the tasty ones. Good night and pass the paprika.